There are villains that are just evil, self-centered, and those are not the villains we're talking about. We're talking about the villain that says something's wrong in the world and I'm the one that's going to change it.
Welcome to the Agents of Change, the podcast experience you've been waiting for your entire marketing career. Search, social, mobile, AI, blockchain, and neuromarketing. These are the Agents of Change, and so are you. Digital marketing success awaits, and your transformation begins now.
Welcome to the Agents of Change podcast, the podcast that's here to help you reach and engage more of your ideal customers online. My name is Rich Brooks. This is episode 588, and this episode is brought to you by Flight New Media. We've been helping small businesses punch above their weight since 1997. Do you need a hand with Google Ads, SEO, Facebook ads, analytics, web design, or branding? We've got you. Head on over to takeflight.com or theagentsofchange.com, and I'll get back to you personally. Today's going to be a fun one as we're talking about villainous behavior. Growing up, I loved going to the library and taking out bound collections of comic books. My favorite was Bring On the Bad Guys, which was the origin story of the biggest, baddest Marvel villains. Later in college, I found a t-shirt with the cover art of all those bad guys. Man, I wore it until it dissolved off my body. I actually made it a header image on Twitter. Not that I go there anymore, but you can check it out if you're curious. After my conversation with this week's guest, I was reminded of a story. I go to Planet Fitness. I have for many, many years. And when I go in there, my first few minutes is just warm up. And I have my favorite elliptical machine and I get on there before I start doing free weights, about 5 minutes or so. And while I'm there, there's a bank of TVs in front of me. And all of a sudden one day, by the way, I always end up being right in front of the infomercial channel. So I always see, whatever infomercial is for sale. And I saw a new one, and it was for the Ninja Smoker, basically this tabletop electric plug-in outdoor grill that can also smoke your meats. And instead of it taking, 12, 18 hours to smoke the meat, it could do it in as little as 30 minutes or an hour, depending on what you're cooking. And I just thought to myself, what a gimmicky piece of crud that is. Like, who would ever actually buy this thing and think that it's as good as getting professionally smoked meats? But day after day, week after week, I got on that same elliptical trainer. I saw that commercial over and over again. And after a while, I started saying, well, I do like grilling food, and smoking has been something I always thought was kind of interesting. Now, it's not cheap. It was $250, but after a while, I'm just like, it would be silly not to own one. And I ended up breaking down and buying one. Now, I will say there's a happy ending to the story. I love my Ninja Smoker. I use it as often as I can. We do ribs on there. We do chicken wings. I've done a pork butt on there. It's surprisingly versatile, and it's a lot of fun to cook on that thing. So anyways, it did end up having a happy story. Why am I sharing this with you? Well, it sort of fits in with some of the villainous behavior we're going to be looking at today. So let's not wait any longer and get right into it. My next guest is the founder of Conversion Sciences, LLC, and the author of the book, Your Custom Creation Equation. Since 2007, he has worked with hundreds of companies to improve their online business. He is a sought-after speaker presenting at IBM, Inbound, LeadsCon, Content Marketing World, Affiliate Summit, and others. He has written for online publications, including ClickZ, Search Engine Land, and Marketing Land. He's also the host of Intended Consequences podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about being the villain in your customer's journey with Brian Massey. Brian, welcome to the podcast.
I'm so glad that I found a place to talk about this a little bit.
This is going to be exciting. But before we get into the whole hero versus villain, good versus evil bit of the show, what led you to conversion optimization and the behavior side of marketing?
Oh, well, so I was trained as a computer scientist, but I had enough social skills and didn't see myself sitting in a cubicle day-to-day coding that when I got out of college, I went into sales for Texas Instruments selling semiconductors. And I rose to my highest level of incompetence in that role and moved back to Austin, got back involved in a little software company here, and had enough opinions that they decided I should be doing their marketing. And then in the 90s, I ran my own business. The dot-com bubble burst and took out some of our clients and took us out as well. But then I spent the early decade of the century building websites and generating leads primarily for business technology companies. And when I realized that I'm just not a very good employee, I have some authority issues, not authoritarian issues. I have some authority issues. I didn't really have any other choice. So programming, sales, marketing, entrepreneurship, I really had to start my own thing. And I had attended a seminar by Brian and Jeffrey Eisenberg. I don't know if you know them, but at this amazing little business school here called the Wizard Academy. And they gave the words to what I was going to be able to do to combine all of those things. That was in 2006. And in 2006, there really wasn't a conversion rate optimization industry. There was no CRO. So I started tilting at windmills and howling at the wind about this new way of doing things. And a short 4 years later, people started to get it. And so started Conversion Sciences in 2007, blogged and taught and did consulting. But it was in 2010, 2011 that we really started doing things like A/B testing and deep customer research and things like that.
Awesome. And you and I met recently in person at Andy Crestodina's conference, Content Jam. And I saw you present and I was really motivated. I came up to you. I said, I'd love to get you on this podcast. And I told you it was Agents of Change. And you said, oh, do you only have contrarians on your podcast or something to that effect? I'm like, no, but why not? At least I should be asking people contrarian questions. And then when we started talking some more, we started talking about the whole idea of like the hero's journey versus the villain's journey and all that sort of stuff, which is how we kind of arrived at today's conversation. Normally, we talk about being the hero in our customer stories, but today we're going to be talking about how brands accidentally or intentionally become the villain.
Yeah.
And so how do brands become the villain in the customer journey?
Well, it might be helpful for those that aren't familiar with the hero's journey defined by Joseph Campbell. And what he did was he went out and studied myth and stories from different cultures and different times and different places in time. And he found that in these stories, there were these common themes. And he was like, there's always this situation where the farm boy is called to adventure by something terrible or magnificent that happens in his world. And he resists and he's like, oh, I'm just gonna, and then he crosses over and begins getting trials and tests and usually has a terrible failure, but that's when he awakens some strength inside of him. And then he charges forward, defeats the dragon, and then comes back home the victor, but also wiser and a better person so that he can contribute to his world. And so these themes were seen over and over and over again. And for me, it was interesting and helpful because, I was applying it to my life. I'm like, oh, but when my company in the 90s blew up, I was like, oh, here's the call to adventure. Something terrible is happening. And now I'm going to charge forward and tests and trials of trying to be an employee when I wanted to build things. And they were just like, oh, the marketing's working really well. Just put quarters in it. And then the magical help is another part of the hero's journey. And the Eisenberg brothers provided that. So I was applying this to my life. But then I began to wonder, there are times where I don't feel very heroic. It's not that I'm evil per se, but self-serving. And I began to wonder, there's a villain in so many hero stories that actually creates all of the events. They're the ones that the sheriff of Nottingham is oppressing the peasants, and that calls Robin Hood to adventure. And then the sheriff of Nottingham is providing all of the tests and trials and stealing the girl and all of the things. And it was just like, oh, there's this other element there. And I began to really analyze it. And so the hero is needs an internal change. Like they need to find this new strength. In the hero's journey, there's literally a death, both either metaphorical or literal, and then a rebirth as their better self. So the hero wants this internal change. The villain is someone who says something needs to change in this world, and I'm the one to do it. So they have a little bit more agency. And I began to realize like if you apply this to a nonprofit that's drilling water wells in Africa, they've decided they're going to go and make this change in the world. And they're having to come up against NGOs and local governments and people who are resisting because it's new and it's changed. And they're just like, no, we're trying to make things better. And I thought like, that's really the villain's role. So I began to realize there's this role where you're not kind of waiting around as a farm boy for the, Obi-Wan Kenobi to come along and bring the stormtroopers and change your life and take you on this adventure. The villain is an agent of change, the cause of the change, and will often be the one that is bringing heroes to light. So if you expand that even more, we think about our brands. We want to help our customer. We have this amazing product, has a better price, and we think everyone should be using this, or at least the people that we're targeting. That's more of a villainous direction. We want to see something change in the world. We want our solution to be out there. And if you think about what's motivating these businesses, it's, yes, we want to provide a great product and everybody be happy, but profit margins, if we're not making a profit on this, we're going to stop doing that thing. So it's kind of villainous. So I took this all the way down the rabbit hole, and I was like, began looking for the things that brands do that map onto this hero villain dance. And that's where this really came out.
And I want to get to that, but just kind of as a side note, thinking about the role of the villain and the best villains, and they do this all the time in the MCU, totally think they're in the right. Like their worldview is, I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. Now, sometimes they might be a little skewed. Loki is the cause of the Avengers coming together, and he basically wanted to rule the world. But the bottom line is, very often these villains do not see themselves as villains. They see themselves as, like you said, agents of change. And before we get into kind of the nuts and bolts, I did go through one of your slide decks, and in there, you've got one of everybody's favorite movies, Ferris Bueller, a few slides dedicated to that. And you say Ferris is the villain of that story and Cameron is the hero. So can you just give us a couple minutes on why Ferris plays the role of the villain when everybody loves Ferris? Say Ferris.
If you step back and look at the symbols and see how they map, and by the way, the director, John Hughes, actually acknowledged that Cameron is the hero. So if you step back and look at it, everybody loves Ferris, is freewheeling, willing to just have fun. They were raising money for Ferris at school because he was homesick and, save Ferris and all that stuff. But if you look at his behavior, it's very sociopathic. Like he's worried about his time. So he cajoles his hypochondriac friend Cameron into going on this adventure with him. And they steal his dad's prized Ferrari and drive it around Chicago. They're calling in and tricking the school into thinking that, it's their parents calling and giving.
They're stealing the identity of Abe Froman, Sausage King of Chicago.
Exactly. And so while Ferris is driving the story forward in this very unsettling, if you step back and look at it, unsettling way, poor Cameron is having all these tests and trials, and the symbolism is even there. So I talked about, there's a death to your old self and a rebirth. There's literally a scene where Cameron, after realizing he's going to get caught by his dad because there's too many miles on the Ferrari, and, he's just broken so many of the rules that he had to keep his little life together, falls into a pool and is drowning, and they pull him out and they think he's dead. And then he reemerges. And after that, you get the catharsis in the scene where Cameron says, you know what, I'm going to have a conversation with my dad rather than being afraid of him for my whole life. So it's a beautiful vision because the person we love is actually the villain. It follows all of the steps of the hero's journey on Cameron's part. And, at the end, the villain has the moment Ferris realized, oh, shoot, there are consequences to my actions because, they end up wrecking the Ferrari. And Cameron is going to just have to have a really hard conversation with his demons. So,
Yeah, it's interesting because I just remember something I'd forgotten. My grandmother saw that movie and when it came out of the theaters, like I did, and she actually was rooting against Ferris. She thought that he should have gotten busted, and I always thought that was crazy. But now I realize she recognized him as the villain. All right, let's take all these ideas and apply them to our business, to our marketing. What are some common villainous practices in marketing that businesses might not realize they're doing?
Well, we're very focused on websites, so I'm going to kind of use that as my touchstone. It really happens in all areas. And it's things like advertising. I'm going to make you want my thing by showing you sexy pictures or glossed over pictures. The hamburgers always look so delicious in the ads to get your interest and get your attention. And I'm going to do something even more villainous. I'm going to run those ads over and over and over again to increase the frequency because I know that your brain is wired that something is better if I've seen it multiple times. So they're going to play those games. Then let's say we're going to come to a website and I'm going to tell you all the wonderful things about the product. I'm going to leave out the negative things. We'll take care of you. Just buy the thing and I think you'll be happy. As we come through, we present pricing and all of this stuff, and we're going to check out. And there are new surprises. There are taxes and there is shipping. So the price we were quoting them is not necessarily the best one, but we're like, we can't put the right price on there because our competitors are putting their basic price on there as well. So we'll lose business. So we talk the game of wanting to help or to make our customers the heroes. But we're doing some very villainous things to push them along in their path. We're asking them to trust us and make some discoveries that are going to be, in some cases, shocking to them. We're doing upsells after that. We're asking them to subscribe so they can save 15% or get free shipping. It is a little bit self-serving, actually completely self-serving.
I'm sure there are people listening, though, that are like, yeah, I do all of those things, but I'm not evil. I'm not the villain. Where does the line get drawn between what is strategic marketing and what is manipulative tactics?
Yeah, I think you have to ask yourself that question. So again, there are villains that are just evil, self-centered, and those are not the villains we're talking about. We're talking about the villain that says something's wrong in the world and I'm the one that's going to change it. The world needs my product. It is less of a world without my product. So I'm going to be putting this in people's hands. And very well may be true. Absolutely. But we're going to use a certain amount of trickery to get our heroes on their path, making decisions and discovering themselves as they're deciding if they should buy our thing or not.
So what are some specific ways that a brand might be doing? Like you mentioned a few things. Is there a way that we know we're on the side? It seems to me that there's good, there's evil, and then there's maybe the anti-hero, or they're the hero, the villain, and the anti-hero. And I think like people would hate to see themselves as the villain. They might be willing to pose themselves as the anti-hero, though obviously a sliding scale. Outside of your own internal mechanism, how do you know if you're on the right or the wrong side of this? Or is there no way to really be sure?
No, I think there is a way to be sure. And so if you're very clear about who you are marketing to, which means you have to be very clear about who you're not marketing to, then you don't need to do things like creating cognitive dissonance. So you ever have a pop-up that says, hey, get 10% off, give us your email address. And to close it, there's a line that says, no, I don't want delicious ice cream,
right,
or I don't like to save money. If you're selling your product to the right people and you're doing a good job of expressing your value, you don't have to do things like that. But you will find out that you can get an incrementally higher completion rate on that form because no one wants to click on something that is counter to what they believe. I do want to save money. And why am I not giving them my email address? So brands that are very clear about who their customers are, and I think this is the hardest thing. This is, we see brand as how we best present our company and our products, but it is more of a razor, a slicing of things like, okay, who are we going to walk away from Because when you try to sell it to everyone, you end up having to play these sorts of tricks. So I think that's the most important thing. And the best way to really understand what your brand position is write your own villain monologue. I think of customers like Patagonia. So Patagonia was very clear that if you have no qualms about buying fast fashion that is wasteful and filling our landfills and using too many resources, you don't buy our jacket, I think was their slogan. They were very clear about who they were and who they wanted to do business with. Hermes is a luxury brand and they create scarcity. They don't make as many of the things so they can charge exorbitant prices, but they know they're not just selling the bag, they're selling the story and certain assumptions that go with those brands. So they're very, very clear about who they're selling to. And I think those are the genius villains who have a plan and know how they're going to change the world.
Okay, so it's fine if we want to change the world, but what we should be doing is staying away from some of the underhanded manipulative challenges. And of course, it does seem like there's a sliding scale. I remember when I used to do presentations based around the seven weapons of influence, the book Persuasion. I would often have this kind of half joke. You can obviously see that these techniques could be used for good or evil, but I look around the room, I only see good people, so I'm willing to share with you kind of approach. So obviously these techniques could be used for good and evil. And maybe your brand voice is that you are sarcastic, which is why you have, no, I don't want to save 10%. And if that's your brand voice, then maybe, okay, you can get away with that with a little twinkle in your eye. But
there's no brand guideline that says we're the sarcastic brand.
So if you are finding yourself, like you said, we should be specific to our audience. So what are some of the ways that we can put ourselves out there, either through our marketing and our advertising, branding, whatever, so that we're not only attracting the right type of clients, but we're also pushing away people who wouldn't be a good fit for us and vice versa?
Yeah. So I think the knowledge of what that is, and this seems obvious, like every brand should know this thing, but you would be surprised that by the time the vision gets boiled down to implementing campaigns and ads and landing pages, we're writing for everybody. Here we have our value proposition is very focused on this segment, but wait a minute, there'll be some people that will be turned off by this thing, or we left something out that would appeal to a few of these people. And the idea is like, if we don't have to, why wouldn't we potentially get some of those people? And that's when you start to have to use trickery and things like that. As another example, you might look at I looked up some other brands in here, and there's one called Buckley's Mixture. I'd never heard of this before, but it's a cough syrup. It's a Canadian company, and it tastes bad. Their motto was, it tastes awful and it works. So those people that just can't have awful things in their mouth are going to shy away from you. But it becomes a story that those people that do swear by the effectiveness of it, they're going to tell those stories. So I think that it is, if you don't have a story, you can't tell a story. So you've got to be able to tell that story and know that certain people are going to hear that story and they're going to go like, that's not for me.
Right.
And so you've got to be ready to do that. I mean, we're talking about myths and fairy tales and they're all stories. And that's, especially in the B2B world, storytelling seems to be very difficult. I'm just going to tell you the rational features and benefits, and then you're going to make a rational decision. But our brains really are the baling wire that keeps them together is stories that unites something with another thing. I mean, a villainous thing I've always done is I wear the lab coat when I'm on podcasts, when I'm on stage. And I know that it gives me a certain advantage because a person in a lab coat, you tend to believe them more. You tend to follow their directions. They've studied this. It's potent. There's also the world of enclosed cognition, which they studied the lab coat. And they found out when you put a group of people in a lab coat and give them a cognitive test, they're going to score about 17% higher than the similar group of people in street clothes.
Crazy.
So not only am I influencing folks watching me by wearing the lab coat, I actually think I'm smarter than I really am. So kind of villainous. But, for my brand, it has been just a fantastic element that my audience can hang impressions on. And I just need to make sure that the impressions they're hanging on the lab coat are not that I'm a lunatic or that I don't know my business. So I have to show up and be smart and be helpful. And I think once a brand says this is who we are, they've really got to show up and make sure for those people that they are living true to that character. And if you can't live true to that character, then you've got to play some tricks to cover your bases.
So for businesses that want to market based on their values, like B Corps, how can they effectively communicate this while understanding that it might drive away some potential customers who either don't know what a B Corp is or don't care about you being a B Corp or just looking for the cheapest prices out there?
Yeah. So they're going to walk away from those things. So there are some landmines with a B Corp. Number one, you're going to tell them the charities that you're giving to, and people who have a political affiliation that doesn't support those are going to be like, I'm not doing this. It is not easy to be a B Corp. So I assume that B Corps are more expensive than regular old corporations that are just doing their thing. And so, yes, it's a very brave thing. And I have a good friend who runs an agency here in Austin, got his B Corp certification, and he is very clear-eyed about what the business is about. And if people are not in line, we don't want them as customers. So it requires those kinds of decisions.
And I know one of the kind of psychological or behavioral tendencies out there is the whole us versus them mentality. And both politicians and businesses have definitely made hay by saying, you and I, we're this group and we're on the right side, and that everybody else is in the wrong side. I mean, you can use that for anything from Coke and Pepsi to red versus blue states. So it can be a very effective and also difficult road to toe, because you may be scaring away people. And there are obviously people who are listening who are small business owners or marketers, and they're trying to figure out what the balance is. Do you have any recommendations on how they can balance that targeting the right audience without losing too many prospects? I mean, that's the fear, that there's just not enough business out there if we do go in with that kind of anti-hero or villain approach in us versus them mentality.
Well, that's probably a bigger problem than we have time for. But I would say that you need to understand what the trade-offs are. So if a small business, let's say HVAC contractor, you're going to be showing up at people's houses and fixing their AC. You're going to show up in a painted van. Your employees are going to be wearing uniforms. They're going to put little booties on their shoes. And this helps make people feel safer. It's also more expensive to run a business with all of these accoutrements. It's hard to find people that are professional and can sell. You can't put someone who's not good at their job in a uniform, and it's not going to work. So you lean into that, and you know you're going to be losing people who are just looking at the price. So you might be a little higher than the other guys. But for those people who, when a stranger shows up to their door and comes into their house and starts crawling around in the attic, that they're going to feel safe, that's the audience you're going for. And you know that's the audience that will pay more for what you're offering. So most of our websites, we just list all of we have pretty good customer service, and our guys are kind of clean, and like, we really know what we're doing. We're doing this for 30 years, and you list them all, but then you don't look any different from anybody else. So, the villain says, we're going to make people safe when we're working for them, and we're going to charge some more money for that. That's what they want to see in the world. And you got to lean into it. And your marketers are going to be like, well, what about, couldn't we also appeal to, and that's when you have to start, that's the journey to the dark side.
Right. So do you have any suggestions for language choices or messaging tactics that could help a business filter out poor fit customers? Have you worked with people and kind of worked up some of the messaging that kind of immediately takes those poor fit people and basically self-selects them out of the process?
So like in a lead generation format, we worked with a company who only wanted to talk to people with 75 or more employees. So on the form, we asked for, how many employees do you have? And if they answered 75, we took them on a different journey, but we made it clear that that's probably not a good fit for us. So it could be something as simple as that. But if you're talking to your audience very clearly and building value with them, you really don't have to worry too much about the others dropping off, because they're going to see, oh, this sounds expensive. This isn't for me. Or they offer too many features. That's not for me. Or they require me to get on a phone call with them and I don't want to do that. Give me a form and let me do it myself. By being clear about who you are talking to, the rest generally will take care of itself.
Yeah. And we've definitely seen that as we've worked with different clients and different types of businesses, that you set up certain hurdles that some people are just not willing to jump over, or they recognize that this is not for them early on. Even with us, I have some follow-up questions when people reach out to me and I ask them budget questions and I put a number in there. Is it greater than this? And when they come back and they say no, I save both of us a lot of time by saying, here's some free resources. We're not in a position to help you, but I wish you the best. So I think all of us could do a better job, save more time, and be able to spend more time with the customers and clients that we can really make a difference for.
Yeah.
Even if we are playing the villain in that particular role.
Well, and you can play it the other way. So if you're looking for those cost-sensitive folks, we call them transactional buyers, they want to jump through. In other words, if you give them a discount code, a way to get a discount code, and they're in your cart deciding whether they're going to check out, and they know they've got this discount code, they're like, oh, I'm going to save so much. And so psychologically, it is a very powerful way to get them to not abandon by your product. So knowing your customers, even at that level, it might sound manipulative, but you know that they get joy from the shopping process and you're providing a little game for them.
Absolutely. And manipulation is one of those words that definitely has a lot of negative baggage, but you can also manipulate people towards positive behaviors. And if you do believe that you have a product that's going to make their life better, you can kind of manipulate them to do this so that they can have more money, they can have more time, they can have the life they've always dreamed about, or whatever it may be. And some people may still call that manipulative in a bad way, but we can manipulate people to get them to take actions that are actually good for them and society if we want to.
Don't be afraid. If you're changing the world, do what you got to do.
Yeah. The villain whose name escapes me right now from The Incredibles. He thought he was doing the right thing. He's like, superheroes are bad. What was it?
Syndrome.
I was like, I want to say Sinestro, but no, that's Green Lantern's enemy. But I was like, yeah, in his worldview, he was making everybody special. And that meant nobody would have to be special and we could all be at the same level. And in his worldview, that was exactly the way things should be. So anyway.
Yeah, and they did a great job of like calling out some of the components of the villain's journey, one of which is monologuing. There's one scene where he's like, oh my God, you got me monologuing.
Yes. Great scene. Now I got to go back and watch that and the second one. If our listeners wanted to take one step towards being more intentional about who they attract and who they repel with their marketing, how would you recommend they get started?
I would have them write their monologue. So what this is I'm going to write about my brand, but I'm not going to write it from a marketer standpoint where I'm just cherry picking the positives. I'm going to write about the good stuff. I'm going to write about the stuff, you know what? We're just not good at that. And there are plenty of examples of businesses taking and a disadvantage and turning it into an advantage, like the Buckley's example where, well, it just tastes bad. It tastes terrible. Like people are going to have this moment of like, what did I just put in my mouth? And they were able to, because they embraced it, they were able to turn it into a effective marketing campaign. So write your monologues. Like, here's what we want to change in the world. I would even start it like, you fools. This is the worst way of doing things. We have a better product and we can do it faster. And here are the things that you're going to challenge us because we're very expensive, but we're so you want to get all of the negative and the positive out. And when you step back and read that, you can be like, ooh, we got some issues here. Some of which you can turn into an advantage, some of which are naturally going to parse out the people that aren't a good fit for you. But it's a great way to get above the noise. I'm not saying you should go in and then take this copy and put it on your website, but your approach will change fundamentally once you realize, like, yeah, there's a whole bunch of people that are not going to like this about us, and we're not going to change it because it's part of us.
Sounds great. All right. Well, for people who want to learn more about you and learn more about conversion sciences, Brian, where can we send them?
All the stuff we're learning, we publish at the Conversion Sciences blog. Go check us out at conversionsciences.com. Got a little CRO course there with some choice posts that I think will get folks that maybe aren't familiar with conversion optimization along on their way.
That sounds awesome. We'll have those links in the show notes. Brian, thank you so much for coming on the show, being the contrarian, being the villain we needed you to be, and teaching us something new.
I hope to hear some stories about your listeners who try this.
For a full transcript of today's episode, along with the show notes and a blog post that summarizes everything Brian and I talked about, we've got all of that information for you for free over at our website at theagentsofchange.com/588. So, after listening to that entire conversation, are you a villain? Are you trying to change the world? Are you an agent of change?
Don't miss another thrilling episode of the Agents of Change podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform.